So excited to have you all with us today. Over 600 of you RSVP'd for this session today about managing emotions at work. So if you are here, say hi in the chat. We want to make sure we can shout you out. Let us know where you're watching from today. We always love to see that we have people from all over the world. So whether it's the middle of the night for you, it's early morning, thank you so much for making the time to join us. And do make sure you say hi in the chat. So I am Melody Wilding, and I am one of your hosts for today. For over 10 years now, I have been working as an executive coach to people I call sensitive strivers. And those are people who are high performers who also think and feel everything more deeply. And I am also a professor of human behavior, a LinkedIn learning instructor, and I'm the author of a book called Trust Yourself, which hopefully many of you here have read. And I am the creator of a program called Resilient. And it's really a program designed to help sensitive strivers regain their confidence, master their emotions, and reach their full potential at work. And that middle piece, mastering your emotions, is exactly what we are talking about today. Because I'm willing to bet that you are here because you are someone who looks like you have it all together from the outside. And I have heard so many times from clients who say, people describe me as someone who's very calm and put together, but that's the last thing I feel like inside. So you probably have a great job, lots of responsibilities, great accomplishments, but on the inside, it feels very different. It may feel very chaotic. Every day may feel like an emotional roller coaster, or that you're just living in this state of being on high alert. Every email, every meeting, every critique sends your heart rate through the roof, feels like an impending crisis. And in those quieter moments when you're by yourself or you're reflecting on the day, you may feel like you're completely alone in those struggles. And it may seem like all the people around you, your colleagues, the people you work with, seem to take things in stride, but you wonder why you are so deeply affected by everything. So if this is all sounding familiar, type yes in the chat. And I love seeing Manoj from UK. Let's see who else we have here. We have Rwanda, India, Kansas City, Missouri, Pensacola, Florida. Hey, Amber, good to see you. St. Louis, Oregon, amazing. So today I am so grateful to be joined by my friend, my colleague, fellow LinkedIn learning instructor, Jay Fields. And we're going to be talking all about how to manage your emotions at work and turn them from something that feels like a liability into an asset. So I'm going to stop talking now because I want to let Jay introduce herself and tell all of you about the great work she does. So Jay, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
All right. Well, first, I want to say thank you for making this happen, Melody. I know we've been talking about doing this for a long time, and here we are. I'm glad the day has come, and I'm like kind of blown away by how many people have shown up. So thank you for all of you who've shown up. I'm a LinkedIn Live newbie, so I'm just totally distracted by all the coming in from all over the world. So I'm going to have to try and do my best to manage all of this. Speaking of managing emotions, I'm going to manage my attention. My name's Jay Fields, and I sometimes joke that I'm Melody's West Coast twinsy or counterpart, because when we met one another, we were like, oh my gosh, we have so much in common. We're both coaches who work with smart, sensitive people. We're both authors. We're both LinkedIn learning instructors, and we oddly, like, fun fact about us, got married on the exact same day last year without even knowing that we had planned it that way. So we have this really like deep level connection that goes beyond something we could have orchestrated. The way that my coaching is a little bit different is my background is as an experiential educator. I've done that for 25 years, and I've been a somatic coach for 15 years. And the word somatic comes from soma, which is Greek for body, which means that I help people leverage the intelligence of their body and their nervous system to be able to grow an embodied sense of self-trust. And as we all know, self-trust then affects everything, impacts everything in your life in a positive way. And my signature program is called Yours Truly. And in that, we work with the body, mind, and the emotions to grow the skill set you need to actually like who you are and have a good experience of yourself in relationships. So my work is inclusive of yourself at work, but also about personal relationships and how you show up there.
Mm. That's amazing. That's amazing. And yes, we are definitely twinsies from different coasts. I love that. And what's so interesting about your approach is your focus on the body. And I think we have a lot of people here who would describe themselves as thinkers, right? We tend to be very intellectual. We tend to be up in our heads all days. So talk to us a little bit about what does the body have to do with emotions? Because I think often we think of emotions as something we intellectualize and we have to mentally work through. So tell us more about that body emotion connection.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that we face is that we think about our emotions. And thinking about emotions is like being in your head and having something happen at the level of your body, and it's a mismatch. It doesn't get that kind of quality of being met and managed.
Mm,
So emotions are physical sensations that we have that our mind then interprets as a feeling. I mean, if you think back to a time that you had a big feeling or even a minor feeling in recent times, it always has a physical sensation to it. So sadness often feels heavy, fear often feels tight or cold, like I get cold before I do something like a big talk. Anger, people often say they're hot and they feel like they have, like, just a lot of extra energy in their body, right? So we have these physical experiences that whether or not we know they're happening, our mind is going to interpret them as a feeling.
mm,
And when we only live from here up, like most of us do, especially at work, um, that's where we get into that habit of, like, thinking about how we feel.
mm,
This is where the research in neurobiology is super, super interesting because we have different types of self-awareness. And one type of self-awareness is conceptual self-awareness. That's what we're doing when we're thinking about ourselves. But another type is embodied self-awareness. And that's what we're doing when we're experiencing ourselves. Like right now, wherever you are, I know it's different times of day where people are. So you might be tired, you might be wired, you might be cold, you might be warm, you might be tense about something, you might be really relaxed. To be able to feel what your experience is you being embodied. And what the research says is that that lights up different parts of your brain. So when you're in your body, you have more access to, wait for it, emotional regulation, um, courage, compassion, empathy, all of these skill sets that we need in order to manage emotions happen and become available to us when we're here down, which I think
mm.
is like so cool and also a little bit of a catch 22, right? Um, because we're always having emotional experiences all the time. And so, one of my questions for you, Melody, because you do work with people in the workplace, particularly around emotions, is what are the biggest challenges you see people facing with their emotions in the workplace, and how does that impact things like decision making and productivity?
Yeah, it's so interesting what you were saying about us living from here down, and the fact that what I find the biggest challenges around people experiencing emotions in the workplace is the resistance to them. Because as you were alluding to this, the idea that we're told keep your emotions out of it, right? Check those at the door. This is just business, and so there's automatically this self negation that happens when you have emotions in the workplace. You get into this dialogue of, I shouldn't be feeling this way, I need to get over this, I have to get back to my work and focus, which only makes things worse, right? And so I think for all of us here, Jay, an important message that I know both you and I always send is that you are a human at work first. And you can't resist or deny these emotions. You have to work with them, right? Because the more you deny them, the stronger they will get. So you asked about what are some of the most common emotions I see, and again, I think you touched on a bunch of those. I would say over the last 3 years in particular, far and above the number one emotion I see people struggling with at work is fear.
Yeah.
Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of ambiguity, right? Because we want control and clarity. Fear of other people's judgment. What will people think of me if I say XYZ or do XYZ? And anxiety, just that overwhelming feeling of having 1,000 things on your plate, being responsible for high stakes decisions, and the worry of, can I measure up? Can I meet these expectations? Anger was another one you mentioned. And, more often I see frustration, sort of that lower grade
Right.
anger of, why can't this person just get with the program? Frustration over dealing with difficult people, or being frustrated because there's certain constraints you have. For example, I was just right before this, I was chatting with a client, and she has someone on her team who is really demoralized, very disengaged, and has said to her, I'm choosing to check out because I don't feel like I'm being recognized or being valued here. And my client said, I feel so frustrated because I need this person to be performing. But at the same time, my hands are completely tied because we have a salary freeze. So there's not a lot that I can do. So that kind of feeling between a rock and a hard place. And, you were asking about what does this do to our decision making, and I'm sure we've all been there where your emotions cloud your ability to make decisions, right? Because you're thinking about so many things in your head that you can't focus on the task at hand. Your frontal brain is offline and you're really in that reactive emotional brain.
Right.
um, and you maybe the high intensity emotions, anger, um, what else is a high intensity emotion? Anxiety, jealousy. Those are really emotionally exhausting, right?
Mm.
So it all of this depletes our
Yeah.
energy. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so speaking of which, Jay, I was sort of touching on different emotions, but also different ways people react to those emotions. And I know you have a really interesting framework around how you see people. What do they do with their emotions? What are the most characteristic ways we handle our emotions? So could you tell us tell us a little more about that? Because I think it will really resonate with people.
Well, just to what you were just sharing about how pervasive emotions are in the workplace, and I saw someone mention, like, everything is a potential trigger, right? Everything is personal at some level, and it's to me sometimes wild that we even have to have this discussion that there's emotions at work, because, like, of course there are, they're everywhere. And, I have my one of my courses on LinkedIn Learning is called Managing Your Emotions at Work. And so what I say at the beginning is, like, here's what we normally do to manage our emotions. And I have the 4 F's for them. This is what I see people do at work in particular. It's the first F is figure it out. They feel like emotion comes up, they feel scared. So if I can figure out why I feel scared and do something about it in my mind, then the fear will go away. um, and if you're a figure outer, you can say yes in the in the chat, because this is like, these are the people who are like, I'm going to analyze this, I'm going to work it from every angle, and if I can know everything about this feeling, then I don't have to be having it,
Mm,
essentially. The second F is fix it. So, like, once you've figured out kind of where it comes from, the fixers are the people who go out and, like, shift the external situation. So let's say you have a client that is perpetually frustrating for you. You just drop the client. Then you don't have to worry about the emotion. The emotion will go away if the client goes
mm,
away. Uh, or you just decide, like, I'm never going to talk about this topic and I'm going to switch my work around so that doesn't ever have to come
Mhm.
up. So if you are a fixer, you can say fixer or fix in the comments. Because, by the way, you can be
I was
all
just
of
gonna ask
these.
that because I feel like I might be all of them depending on the circumstance or the person.
Yeah, depending on the circumstance, depending on the person, depending on what you can do, because I feel like kind of people move through them. Most of us cerebral people start with trying to figure it out. Then we move into action and fixing. The next one, though, is I call it fooling yourself. So, fooling yourself is when you either can't figure it out or you can't fix it. You decide to make it not a big deal.
Mhm.
Like, I'm just gonna decide this doesn't bother me, and, "Oh, no big deal." This is also where people will throw in distraction. So, I'm gonna distract myself. I'm gonna do something that feels good. I'm gonna have a drink. I'm gonna watch Netflix. I'm gonna shop online. I'm gonna go out with my friends and just ignore that there's this quagmire over here that makes me feel like, "Blah," right? So, if there's actually not something you can do for it, people just go into doesn't
Mhm.
exist. If you are a fool yourself person, you know that doesn't really work. Um, and then the fourth one is flip your lid. And flip your lid is, I think, the thing that people are most scared of happening at
Mhm.
work. And that is when the emotion just comes out of you.
Mhm.
You've been frustrated for a while, and all of a sudden you're in a meeting and your voice, you're raising your voice, you're sounding a lot more angry than you would ever hope to sound at work. Or maybe you're in a one-on-one and someone asks you, "How are you doing?" And you just break down crying. Flipping your lid is when you can't manage it anymore and the emotion runs
Mhm.
you as opposed to you running the emotion.
Mhm. Yeah, and I wanna underscore something because you and I were using the term emotion regulation, right, or emotional regulation, and I just wanna be clear for everyone that Jay and I are huge advocates for emotion. We would never tell you not to have emotions at work. But emotion regulation is about experiencing, processing, expressing your emotion in a way that you feel good about. So it doesn't
Right.
mean not having any sort of reaction. But Jay, is there anything you want to add to that? Because I think a lot of people get that when they hear emotion regulation, they think stoic or I have to act cold and just not have any sort of reaction.
Right. No, I'm glad you said that because when I say managing your emotions, I am not at all saying suppress them, squash them. I'm saying, what I just said, to me, I think there's a difference between being run by
Yes. Mhm.
emotions and running
Yeah.
them. And when I say run your emotion, what I mean by that is like that you can feel the sensation of the emotion when it's happening and you choose what to do with that. You might squash it for a little bit, knowing that when you get to a place where it's more
Mm.
appropriate for you to have it,
Mhm.
you can have it. But I'm never an advocate of just saying, "Make it go away," because it doesn't
Yeah.
work. And that's where the flipping the lid comes back in, which I wanna say one other piece to that, and that is it doesn't necessarily look like yelling or screaming or crying. Flipping your lid can also look like going very, numb,
Mhm.
getting foggy is I don't know if anyone else when you get scared or really upset, your brain fogs. You can't think creatively, so it doesn't necessarily look like this. It can look like
Mhm.
withdrawing and really trying to just kind of shut down.
Internalization, like self-protection. Yeah.
Right,
And so many people
right.
saying, let's see, I just wanna, scroll through here. Kristen, Robin, Stanley saying, "I'm definitely a fixer." A couple other people, Elizabeth mentioning, "I am flipping the lid." Uh,
Yeah,
Memory said, "Oh my gosh, I am a definite fixer, but have also flipped my lid a lot too." And I bet Jay, I definitely have found this because I work with a lot of clients who are fixers and who are over functioners. When a problem happens, they are the first one that feels like I have to make everything okay. But they
mhm.
get to a point where their resentment and frustration and anger over having to do that builds up. then they get to a point where they flip their lid because it's like, no more, no more. I'm not being taken advantage of anymore. So, yeah,
Right.
pretty common.
No, I think that's the pattern. It's a lot of this and
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
It's a lot of either this doesn't exist, this emotion doesn't exist, and then all of a sudden, this is all I can
yeah,
do. And so, because this is such a common pattern, we're seeing people saying like, "I'm a fixer, I'm a figure outer, but I also flip my lid." Um, Melody, can you talk to us about what you know about maintaining professional composure, especially when there's these supercharged situations that sometimes build over time
yeah.
at work?
Yeah. And I know, Jay, you mentioned your managing your emotions course. I also have a course called Managing Your Emotional Response to Workplace Stress. So we'll make sure all of those are linked in the chat here and that you all have access to those. But one of the tools I share in one of my LinkedIn learning courses is it's called STOP. It's an acronym. So STOP. And I want to offer this because I think it's a useful and it's an easy to remember framework that you can all take yourselves through. So the S stands for stop. Pretty self-explanatory. And the point there is to pause, to, as Jay was mentioning earlier, notice and name your feelings. Okay? So
Yeah.
notice, as Jay was saying, emotions are energy in your body. And so you need to identify where they are coming up in your body. Is it in your chest, in your stomach? Uh, Identify it with specificity because so many of us, as Jay was saying, we stay in that intellectual level of trying to figure out the emotion and we gloss over it. We say things like I feel really overwhelmed, I feel totally stressed right now, but those are kind of cop out descriptors of emotions. So the more specific you can get, I feel disappointed, I feel, just to take an example, you could let's take the example of anger. You could be totally enraged and irate, or you could be slightly peeved and annoyed. And those are totally different
Different,
approaches to the
yeah.
same kind of category of emotion. So there are lots of different, if you Google sort of emotional vocabulary words, you'll find lots of great resources online for that. You can even print them out. I've had clients who print them out and keep them on their desk or their fridge at home, and it helps with work communication, it helps with personal communication as well. So, really identifying your emotions with specificity, understanding where they are in your body. Two steps to that first one, stop. The second part is the T, take a step back. So, this is where you do some of that regulating, taking a few
Mhm.
deep belly breaths. Maybe for me, I notice that I tend to hold on to emotions in my hips or in my shoulders. And so I have to
Mm.
really imagine relaxing those places. Or you could do imagery of imagining yourself in your most soothing place, or doing a grounding exercise like looking at five things around you that are all the same color. um, and Jay, I know we're going to talk about self-talk in a little bit. That also goes in this step here of taking a step back, but I'm going to leave that loop
Okay.
open for everyone. um, so the O in stop is to observe what is happening around you as objectively as humanly possible. So I want
Mm.
you to imagine you're watching the scene play out like a movie. And how does taking that third person perspective change your reaction to the situation? You can also, another
Mm.
great tool is to talk to yourself about the situation in third person. And I know that sounds really
Mm.
weird to say, like, Melody is feeling this right now. But there's actually really strong research to show that using your name and talking to yourself in third person helps you psychologically distance and detach from really intense emotions. And then the last step in stop is to proceed mindfully. So, really making a conscious decision about how you want to move forward. What is the next
Mhm.
action that gets you closer to your goals, that is most aligned with your values, that would be a win for you and a win for the other person? So
Mm.
that's that STOP acronym. I just want to repeat it again because I know I went through a lot just there. So the S is for stop. Stop, notice and name your feelings. Take a step back, regulate your nervous system, observe what's happening around you as objectively as possible, and then
Mhm.
proceed mindfully in terms of making a conscious next step.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And then one other thing I want to offer here is we were talking about expressing your emotions. And Jay, we both work with people who may be more prone to crying at work, right? And that's always a question I get is how do I deal with what do I do if I cry at work? If I get really overwhelmed or I get negative feedback or what have you. And so I want to share that when it comes to expressing emotions at work, you will do yourself a favor if you connect that emotion to your passion and your commitment. So if you find
Mhm.
yourself crying at work, saying something like, you know, as you can see, I'm having an emotional reaction because I care a lot about our team's success. Instead of, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I always do this, taking this sort of apologetic, undermining yourself stance. If you express and you acknowledge your emotion with strength and you credit it to commitment and passion, there's research that
So
shows that's received much better than sort of throwing yourself under the bus. So yeah, Jay, anything you want to add there?
yeah, I mean, that is so good connecting emotion to, like, what you're passionate about because the opposite of feeling isn't, um excuse me, I usually say this a different way, but, I'll say that another
Yeah.
way. Let me say this, um, we don't get charged up about things we don't care
Mm.
about.
Hmm.
Don't get mad, we don't get scared, we don't get sad, we don't get any emotion about something we don't care about. So if you can connect it to that level of care, that is where you bring back in your strength. I think the other thing, if you're going to be sharing emotions at work, people often ask me, "What do I do when I'm having just a bad
Mm.
day and I'm off in some way? And do I share that or do I not share that?" And in that capacity, I usually tell people, "Yes, I would share it."
Mhm.
But how people tend to share that is by the time they've gotten to the place where they feel like, "Oh my gosh, I just have to say something." They usually do it in a way that's kind of pulley or needy, and then people are like, "Well, gosh, what am I supposed to do with this now?" Like, you're kind of melting down. And so what I say with people is share, "I'm having an off day," or "I'm not feeling like myself today," or "I'm feeling kind of sad." And then to add in and either say, "And I don't need anything from you. I just wanted you to know because I might seem off."
Mhm.
So that's giving people the right read, right? Or to say, "And here's what I could use from
Mm.
you. Could we do this meeting a different day? Or could I have 5 minutes to just go outside and take a breath before I come back?" So either make it a specific ask related to what you're sharing, or be very clear, "I don't have an ask. I just wanted to make sure that you're not reading my energy
Mm.
wrong." Because if you're scared and you don't say something, sometimes it comes across as you don't care or you're withdrawn. And so I think that's another way for, it's very uncommon that you're going to share your emotion and be like, "And here's why, and here's what happened, and I had this conversation." But it is okay to say, "This is what's going on," because you can probably read it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, proactively communicating, let's call it that. And then speaking of expressing your emotions at work, so we hear all the time, I want to feel like I can bring my whole self to work. I want to feel like I can be my authentic self at work. Yet we all face this double bind of we want to show up as our full selves, but we don't want to be labeled as too emotional, too sensitive, too much if we do say something. So, do you have any tips for how do we bring our full selves to a situation while still balancing being professional and work appropriate?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think um, it definitely piggybacks on your stop in the sense of so much of uh, being authentic with others first starts with what kind of internal relationship you're having with
Mhm.
yourself. So if you've been able to stop and assess, this is the feeling I've named, you can be more authentic. So I want to just go back and say, like, the actual work of the external authenticity does take practice in terms of how do you say something, and it's skill
Mhm.
building. But the first skills are around um, kind of, we've been talking about emotional regulation, nervous system regulation, and when I'm working with clients, what we talk about how that helps you to come back to this sense of your present day self.
Mm,
'Cause usually when we have strong emotions in the workplace, it's not necessarily related to something that's happening in that
mhm,
moment. It reminds us of something else, or it feels akin to this thing that happens all the time in this other situation, and now it's here. And so a big part of being authentic is, like, becoming aware of what are the different parts of you who are experiencing the
mhm,
emotions. I was just talking with a client yesterday, and in my one-on-one work with people, we do a lot of, like, kind of assessing who's your true
mm,
self, the self that is you at your best, and then who are all these other strategic selves that come into play. And this woman's strategic self is, like, super overachiever, definitely into the, I'm gonna take everything off of everybody else's
mm,
plate so everybody else can feel okay. And that part of her gets really worked up fast, whereas the more balanced part of her can look at things and be like, "Oh, I actually can't take that off your plate because I'm already overwhelmed." So being authentic, requires first being able to kind of I talk about, like, unbraiding these different
mm,
parts that, um, show up as, uh different
mm.
embodiments. Is that making sense, or do I have to go? I'm
Yeah.
trying to talk without going
No,
too
it
deep.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me, and just coming from, a therapeutic background, we refer to that as parts work, right? That we all have
Yep.
different parts of ourselves. You may have this, imposter part of you that's worried. Everyone's you get emotional because you feel like at any moment people are gonna call you out and say, "Get out of here," because you don't know what you're doing. You have,
Yeah.
you have a part of you that's a rebel, and I definitely have that part of me, which is why I work for myself. Which is like,
Exactly.
don't tell me what to do, and so we all have these different parts of ourselves, and when you can dialogue with them and recognize that, oh, there's these different dimensions, which one needs support and comfort, and which one do I want to bring forward in this situation? It provides a lot of not just clarity. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I Because you don't want to, like, put your full force behind being authentically a rebel necessarily,
No, yeah.
or put your full force behind being authentically an imposter,
Mhm.
right? You want to be able to go, "Oh, this is that thing coming up, that's this part of me," and to be authentic, I can speak to that,
Mhm.
but not be
Yeah.
it. And I think that's the thing that is it does take skill to do that,
Mhm.
um, but it is a completely learnable
Yes,
skill.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I just wanna read some of the comments that are coming because everyone is loving this conversation, and please, as we're going along, share what is resonating for you, share what is coming up for you, any questions you have for Jay and I. Um, and let's see here. Christy was saying, "I'm so happy that times have changed in regards to emotional resilience. Uh, in At the start of my working career, emotions were not acknowledged and advised to be kept out of the workplace." And Jay, I know we'll talk a little bit about that as we wrap up in terms of what we see is changing in the workplace. Um, and we had someone on LinkedIn who shared it would be difficult to completely eliminate emotions because without it, it discounts your unique personality. And the best approach is balancing how to be more objective, even during challenging situations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, so, I know I'm
Yeah.
watching time go by, and we've been talking a lot about how this shows up. Do you have an example of a time where you saw someone effectively manage emotions at work, and, like, what that looked like, the positive outcome that came from that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it all goes back to, like you were saying, you don't have an emotion if you don't care about something. And our emotions are signals. So anger can be a signal that something that's important to you has been violated, right? A value or an expectation. Jealousy or envy can be a signal that someone else is fulfilling a dream or a desire that you have. So I want to encourage everyone to see your emotions as signals, and instead of villainizing yourself for having them and saying, oh, I should just get over this, really try to ask yourself, what is this most emotion trying to tell me? How is it trying to get my attention, and what for? And, I also want to say everyone here sounds like they are, they're here for a reason in this conversation because they are deep thinkers and feelers. And that gives you an incredible capacity and superpower to understand and attune to where other people are coming from. And, so many of the clients I work with don't think of themselves this way, but having that gift really makes you very adept at influencing people, persuading them, because you literally have a pulse. You understand the heartbeat of what their motivations are, what their concerns are, so you can speak to those, you can neutralize them, you can put their mind at ease. And it also makes them more skilled at executive presence. And we tend to think of executive presence as like cold, harsh, bold, but in actuality, executive presence is how other people feel around you. Do they feel a
Right.
sense of warmth coming from you? You're approachable, you're kind, you create psychological safety, and do they feel competence? You know what you're talking about, you're steady, you're able to be calm and sort of, you know, have have control of the situation. So that's how I've seen it really work for people. And Jay, I want to come back to that idea before of I was mentioning when I talked about the STOP acronym, self-talk. So
Mhm.
I love how you coach people to show up for themselves when they are having a difficult emotion. So can you talk about or give us any tools for navigating when we're having a difficult emotion? How should we talk to ourselves? What works in those situations?
I'm glad you asked because I was like, "Oh, I wanna come
Yeah.
back around to this point because it feels really important." And I see that Kristen Abernathy just said empathy is a huge skill in
Yeah.
leadership, and I 100% agree in terms of empathy for others, but also self-empathy. And, we talk a lot about self-understanding or self-compassion or all these different self dash words. We don't talk about self-empathy a
Mm,
lot. And, um, so this comes back to your question, like, how do you talk to yourself? And I can't take claim for this. This next tip I'm about to give you comes from a woman named Sarah Payton, and she's written a book called Your Resonant Self that I always recommend to people. And her shortcut, her tip for self-empathy is the 2 words, "of course,"
mm,
as in, "Of course I feel this
mm,
way." Now, for those of us who are the thinkers and the figure outers and the people who wanna go cerebral about emotions, this is your best ticket to try and get out of your head and back into experience. And you use the word presence, Melody, and I think this is the piece that's so important about embodiment and
mm,
emotions, is that when we can feel and be felt, that's when our emotions get more regulated, actually. So to be able to say to yourself, of course, I am upset about this. I really care about the outcome. I care about my client. And right now it feels like it's going sideways. And of course I would be
mm,
upset. So this is like, it's a little bit, you get to use the thinking and to like put it in context why it makes sense. But the of course, and I'm doing this on purpose, putting my hands on my
mm,
heart, like of course has a warmth to it. It's us saying to ourselves, "You make
mm,
sense. Your emotion isn't weird or silly or out of place. It might not be appropriate to share, but it doesn't mean that it's
mm.
wrong." Think this 2 words, of course. I've had people tell me this is a game changer for them. So, of course, is a big
It
one.
is. It definitely is a game changer, right? It's again, it's self-validation. It totally changes. And what I think is so fascinating is that so many of us have been brought up with the idea that you should be critical of yourself, that that's what makes you perform and gives you your edge. When very counterintuitively, all of the research shows that self-compassion, all the self-worth, self-understanding, self-empathy is
Exactly.
actually what gives you the edge because you take your brain out of that fear state of, I did something
Yeah.
bad, everything's going to go wrong, I ruined everything, and you give yourself more mental bandwidth back, literally. So, Jay, could you repeat the book and the author again?
That Sarah Payton, Peyton, and the book is Your Resonant
Yeah,
Self.
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, Jay, last question for you is, what do you think about the future of work and emotions? What do you think? What have you seen so far, especially over the last 3 years, about how we're talking about or dealing with emotions differently in the workplace? And what do you think this means for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to hear what you think about this too and what other people think in the chat, but my experience of it is that in the last few years, it's like it's now common knowledge that we're all gonna have emotions, and that there is no separation between being a person and being an employee, and having that role. So I think there's an openness and a willingness to be like, "Yeah, we wanna embrace this," but I don't think there's a skill set.
Mm,
I think that there is like, um, there's an invitation, but there's like this kind of murky, it's messy
mm,
still. So I think the future of the workplace, and my hope is one in which there is more emotional intelligence training, and there is more, from top to bottom, everyone involved in learning the actual skills, because it's not just one skill, it's skills that build upon one
yeah.
another, and, like, I hope that the future of work is one in which it takes this seriously, that over time, there's gotta be training for how do we be humans together.
Yes. Yes, right. It seems so simplistic, yet it's so foundational. And what's really fascinating is that, for Trust Yourself and for my new book, I've been looking a lot at, like, what are the skills that matter in the future of work. And every survey says empathy, emotional intelligence, problem solving, communication, working with people. That's what's going to
Right.
matter 3, 5, 10 years from now. And someone before, early on in our conversation, had a comment around, can't we just outsource this whole emotions thing to
All that.
AI? Which would be great. But, in many ways, that is our competitive edge as humans. So I would love to hear what everyone's takeaways are as we come up at the end of our time here. Please go ahead, type in your takeaways, what resonated with you the most, what you're carrying away from this training today and you're going to apply for yourself. And Jay, I would love to share where people can find you. Like I said, we'll make sure all of your links are in the chat, but tell people how they can connect with you and find you.
Yeah, the easiest way is through my website, which is j-fields.com. So jay-fields.com. And there, if you add /join, that's how you can get on my newsletter and be up to date with. I have a video that comes along with the basic exercise, which is this like awesome under 1 minute thing you can do with your body to regulate your emotions and your nervous system. So if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll get that. But also my website, you'll be able to see the Yours Truly course. And I have a page that links to the 4 LinkedIn learning courses I have as well. So I would love to be able to share this with you. If you sign up for the newsletter, I am working on being able to share links to give you access to the Managing Your Emotions course.
Yes.
So
Yes, and you're active here on LinkedIn. Well, we're simulcasting to LinkedIn, Facebook,
thank you.
and
Yes.
YouTube, and all the places. But I do want to encourage people to connect with you here on LinkedIn as well, since you post great content, and to check out your courses because they're excellent and they're popular for a reason. And they have many more tools we didn't have.
Because everybody, anytime I tell people, they're like, "Oh, what are your courses on?" I say, "Manage Your Emotions." I've never had someone not say, "Oh my gosh, I
Yes,
need that."
exactly, exactly, exactly. And if anyone wants to connect with me, you can also find me here on LinkedIn. You can you can take my LinkedIn learning courses. We'll make sure those links are in the chat for you. You can also get a free chapter of my book at melodywilding.com/chapter. And yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining today. So many people were saying they loved the of course tool. Uh, a bunch
Yeah.
of people saying they liked the stop tool and the idea of balancing emotions with logic and the idea that emotions really make us who we are. So Jay, I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with us and for everyone for joining us today for this
Yes.
great conversation. Please feel free to share this with others. And, as always,
Yeah.
take care of yourself, everybody. We'll see you very soon.
Yes.